All right, so let's talk about the history of globalization. So, the idea of globalization starts with this ancient trade route, the Silk Road, which connected the Middle East, Europe, and Asia all together. The Silk Road helped enable ideas and exchange of valuable goods and new inventions and innovations from all around the world. It was kind of like the world's first internet. In the time of the Silk Road, you had routes very similar to what you see here on the map. The blue routes would represent seafarer routes, so you could travel by boat throughout the Indian Ocean and in the Mediterranean Sea and other areas. And the red routes you see are more the ground routes that went across Central Asia into the Mediterranean region. So let's listen here, a little crash course episode on the Silk Road.
Everyone living in Africa and Eurasia, as we will see today. Let's go straight to the thought bubble. As previously mentioned, the Silk Road was not a road. It's not like archaeologists working in Uzbekistan have uncovered a bunch of yield signs and baby on board stickers. It was an overland route where merchants carried goods for trade. But it was really two routes. One that connected the eastern Mediterranean to Central Asia, and one that went from Central Asia to China. Further complicating things, the Silk Road involved sea routes. Many goods reached Rome via the Mediterranean, and goods from Central Asia found their way across the Pacific to Japan and even Java. So we shouldn't think of the Silk Road as a road, but rather as a network of trade routes. But just as now, the goods traveled more than the people who traded them. Very few traders traversed the entire Silk Road. Instead, they'd move back and forth between towns, selling to traders who'd take the goods further toward their destination, with everybody marking up prices along the way. So what'd they trade? Well, silk, for starters. For millennia, silk was only produced in China. It is spun from the cocoons of mulberry tree-eating worms, and the process of silk making, as well as the techniques for raising the worms, were closely guarded secrets since the lion's share of China's wealth came from silk production. The Chinese used silk as fishing line, to buy off nomadic raiders, to keep things peaceful, and to write before they invented paper. But as an export, silk was mostly used for clothes. Silk clothing feels light in the summer and warm in the winter, and until we invented $700 pre-distressed designer jeans, decking yourself out in silk was the #1 way to show people that you were wealthy. Thanks, Thought Bubble. But the silk...
All right, so thanks to Crash Course there. We know a little bit more about this time period. And one thing we know is that the Silk Road was often protected by the Mongols. Although often in history they're given credit as kind of the warring people, they were a huge balance in maintaining the safety and security on the Silk Road. They realized that good commerce and good globalization was good for them and good for their neighbors. And sometimes maybe that meant they went and raided their neighbors because they had good stuff. But this was a key reason for the Europeans eventually to find sea routes to China, which eventually would lead to this huge age of exploration. So we move into the Renaissance, and the Silk Road had been closed, much due to wars and battles and lack of security along the road, but also due to disease. The Black Death had wiped out millions of people. There were lots of people who did not trust venturing away from their borders. So the Italian explorer Marco Polo is going to travel the Silk Road to China in 1271. When he comes back to Italy, he's bringing back all these things, but he's also bringing back knowledge of how to get to China, which kind of kickstarts other explorers, including Christopher Columbus. Again, in the Renaissance time period, the European cities start to grow and the feudalist idea or feudalism starts to fade away. And these increasing populations, we start to see the emergence of a new class of people, better known as the merchant class. And the merchant class are really about trading, and they don't want to trade just stuff there in their backyard. They want to trade stuff from around the world. Which leads us to this age of exploration. And in the period of the age of exploration, we start to get a massive migration and a massive movement all around the world. So during the age of exploration, we come up with this unique idea of Columbian exchange, named for obviously Christopher Columbus. And you can see here on the map the transfer of goods from the old world on the right, Afro-Eurasia, into the new world, the Americas, both North and South America. This trade of ideas, this exchange of people, goods, animals, you name it, this becomes a huge catalyst and a huge movement for all of these European nations that will start exploring and venturing in this direction, eventually leading to colonization of North and South America, obviously, which was already inhabited by hundreds of millions of Native Americans. So, globalization in the world that you live in today may look like corporations that branch out worldwide. You can see name brands throughout Europe, Asia, Africa, both North and South America. But our world today is more connected than it ever has been before. This has created jobs, but it's also taken jobs. This has created wealth, but it's also perpetuated the idea of poverty in third world countries. The reality that our world is interconnected and will continue to grow smaller is real. The question becomes, how do we prepare for these global realities? So, really interesting chart here. Communication has moved at an all-time rapid pace. It took 75 years for the telephone to get 100, or I'm sorry, to reach 50 million users. It took 13 years to reach 50 million television users. It took 35 days to get 50 million people playing Angry Birds. So we have a massive move in communication. You can see here how quickly in 3.5 years, 50 million users were on Facebook. Within the next 10 years, 63% of all the jobs in the United States will require post-secondary education. That means after high school. And 90% of new jobs in growing and high-wage industries will definitely require post-secondary education. So what skills are you going to have to bring to the table? Well, these are the words that help define what employers are looking for in 21st century. The larger the word, the more often it was said by 21st century expectations, or for employers and what they're looking for down the road. So you can see creativity, the ability to adapt, communication, collaboration, all of these skills that we talk about, information literacy. So what does that mean? What new skills am I going to need? You're going to have to be able to work with others, adapt your thinking styles, manage multiple things, multitask, virtual collaboration. We live in a world now, if I need to talk to somebody in Germany, let's Skype. We don't have to get on a plane and fly to Berlin, and they don't have to get on a plane and fly here to us. We can communicate worldwide within a matter of seconds. So, what's the future of your world look like? The future of this world of globalization, it's really going to have its ups and it's really going to have some downs. But the key is you're living in a time period that will be the most competitive world we've ever seen. 8 billion people competing for jobs. In many cases, we don't know what they look like yet. You're competing daily, not only in your own classroom, in your own building, in your own city, but you're going to be competing very soon against the world for those great jobs that you hope to get. Hope you enjoyed this presentation and a look at how globalization has impacted and affected your lives.